It's Nancy welcoming you to Gardens Grove. I'm going to put a record of a few things that need to be done in the garden to give it a little lift for fall. I noticed one thing right here, this little tire planter. The plants that I have in it are dead, so now there is a little on the back side that is just turning its pretty fall colors and still has some life in there, but I think I would like to put something more in that pot. I think the tall phlox, it's getting spent. There's still some color there, but I think I'll probably take at least some of it out. Of course, I'll leave the root so it'll be back next spring. I still want to take some of my coleus and put them in places where other things have just totally went away or look scraggly through the summer, and put some pretty bright color in the bare spots. And I've taken several off of this little plant through the summer even, and it still looks good. It actually makes them look fuller and better to take them off, even though, even as I say that, I know that's hard to do, because of course when you see all the gorgeous color there, you just want to leave it there while it is beautiful and not cut it down. But actually it does help to do that. It helps this little plant to go ahead and get put on more branches and branch out and just look fuller. And then of course you've got another little clipping to start somewhere. I think it would be a good idea to clip back along this little walkway quite a bit, all the way up it. And again, I hate clipping back when things are so pretty, but I think it would look so much neater. And we know it's all going to be gone at a first frost. So I think it would just be nice to have it nice and neat for a while. Here's another job that will need to be done, not too early, not yet, but it will need to be done before the hard freeze comes, so we can have these out of the way, and they're just easier to do when they're solid rather than when they've frozen and just laying there in a wadded up mess. This little area needs to be cleaned out. I need to probably tie up and stake some of this that's just flopping over, and then just see what all is even in there that I need to trim up and make it look neater. That's what it needs. And this is yarrow. It's totally spent. There's a little bit of life there, but for the most part this is gone for the season, and I just need to chop it down at the root or close to the root. This is actually some more that I chopped down some, but as you can see, it just needs to go ahead and go all the way down to the root. There's barely any green there at all, but I believe it will come back out next spring. I need to go ahead and trim some of my zinnias back again. I trimmed them once, but they need trimming again, which is a good thing, because then you can see how these are more green and pretty. But if you don't trim them, they all become more like this one right here, which is just all ratty looking. But it does have a gorgeous bloom. I probably should go ahead and trim back my pennies for next until next season when they come out again. A lot of them have these bad spots on them. I like to usually leave my peony, the little green foliage of the peony, but they're looking so terrible right now. It would definitely look better if I just went ahead and took that out. And the roses are always in need of being trimmed. So many things have already spent for the season, like these blue cardinal flowers, and they would look better if I would just trim that all the way down to where you could see that little decor in the pot, and just trim the foliage away from it. I need to save some seed from this. I definitely want some of this, and hopefully I can get it back in the garden from seed next year. That would be great. I actually like the seed heads of the clematis, and I probably will leave this, but I probably could trim it away from this little decor a bit, and it would be prettier. Of course, this little 3-tiered, the whole thing needs to be redone. Needs to be trimmed. Actually, I wouldn't redo it at this season, at least not this year, and not ever until I have more time, if that should ever happen. But I do want to trim it back because I think it could be beautiful, and right now it's just overgrown. And I also think that I possibly could take some of these little clippings off of these and put starts in other places where they would look even better. And if I do what's in my mind to do right now, next year these will be full of succulents because they just don't do well. The pot is too small. It gets very little watering, even if I water it every day, which I do, but it's still not really enough. And then what is enough, it's kind of turned yellowish there, but look at that pretty bloom. But I think these will all be in succulents or some type of ground cover next year. And most of my pots are in need of a little haircut here and there, and then maybe putting some coleus clippings in there. And this maybe doesn't look so great, but I do want to keep this because it'll be a beautiful little mound of yellow blooms in the spring, and I like that. Although I may go ahead and try to clip some of these off and get them started in different places too. This little pot has kind of came out of it since I made a bigger hole in it so that it could drain better, but even though it has, it's still got a lot of scraggly places in it that I could do better with this little pot too. These little pots will be coming in soon, and we're trying to fix up lights where they will do better than they did last year. I had them setting on little plant stands, and they were just not reaching the plant as well, so I'm going to try to hang them from the ceiling some way, not the pots but the lights, so that I can get them directed toward the pots better, and hopefully that will help me to save some of my plants better. This is another one that will be coming inside. And of course I still need to do this, although it won't do me a lot of good to do it this fall because it will probably be to do over again in the spring. But I still would like for it to look nice. If I have the time, I will go ahead, and it definitely needs this old water taken out, some fresh water, and I'm using cat litter for the water garden soil, and I'm hoping that will work. I've used it before and it's worked well for me. This is another little pot that definitely needs some fall refreshing. This little pot is still looking great, and it'll still be a while, but these will be some good specimens, I'm thinking, to put in to clip off and put in a glass in the window to save through the winter. Hopefully we will have a little more time to do those things, but it will be coming right up on us before we know it. I still have not decided on this one whether I want to just leave this big mound of coleus or if I want to trim it all back and maybe even put some of it somewhere else and see if there's anything left underneath it of my original plants. Although this was one of my original plants, but it has totally taken over, and I'm wondering, is there still something else left in there? And I do know there is some purple vinca in there somewhere. These little pots could use some fall refreshing too. A little bit of a haircut, I think. And there's a lot of the tall stalks that I need to trim down. Some of these I do want to save some seed from, but a lot of them just need to be clipped out of the garden so it can be refreshed for fall too. My little swirling butterflies is looking pretty this morning. They kind of had a struggle to come out from that late freeze that we had too, or early spring freeze. Late for a freeze, but it's looking good today. And I probably do need to trim some of it back and definitely some of this grass back out of the pathway. And these pictures are definitely, or clips are definitely not going to be good show pieces, but hopefully they will be good before pictures or shots so that it can, hopefully these are going to look better than this when I'm done. If I get the time and wherewithal to go ahead and get that done, which I hope I do. This pretty autumn joy sedum did go ahead and lay down quite a bit. It is standing up tall more than it has been in the past though, and I did have a support on this. I don't know exactly what happened. You can tell there's one over here, and I probably put it on this one. It looks like it needed to be on this one more so, but it's still pretty. But it is another little area that could use some refreshing. I'm not exactly sure what to trim out of it and how much room to give it to make it look. I like it looking lush. I want it to look lush and pretty, but I don't want it to just look so, well, I don't know the word for it right now, but when it just gets so conglomerated that it's just looking ratty rather than pretty, I don't like that. This little pot too could definitely use a little sprucing up. It needs a little color. I had a pretty purple penta in there, but it's just not doing well. And these pretty coleus are actually most usually a bright orangey color, but in this particular spot they just kind of look like a drab green, which can also be pretty, but just, I don't know, I think I could do something better with this little pot if I have the time and can get it together to do so. This little pot has looked great. It's just doing really well, although I probably will trim a little bit off the top of this and use maybe to put over there in that pot that I just showed you to give it a little more color. I will definitely want to remember to get these seeds clipped off before they go to seed, and I don't want them to just drop and come up everywhere. I do though, as I've told you, I always would like at least one of these pretty castor bean in the garden just for the beautiful leaves and for that seed head. It's so pretty in the fall. And I'm guessing my beautiful autumn clematis is not going to just fill all out like I wanted it to, because I've just got too many that are dying, and then a few that are just coming in bloom. So they're not coming in bloom all at the same time. That's when it's beautiful. I've got to see if I can figure out some way to get it to do that when it's just really fills out and has a billow of white. That's the way I want it, and that's the way I'd love to be able to show it to you. And I'm so glad I finally decided to take this little plant stand from a place where I had it and put it here, because it's just needed here that much more, so that you can really see this little angel above it. Just added to this little pot so much, and I wish I would have done it sooner. Lots of places where the clematis need to be rustled off of there, the old dried looking. The dry looking clematis, like over here on this fence. All that needs to be rustled off so it can look pretty and you just see the green and not see all that old brown. That would be my plan, to hope to get that done, and then to have one last garden tour so that people can come and see the beauty of the garden. It's like in memory of the 2021 garden, because it will soon be gone. And I'm not sure if I want to try to do anything more to these little pots now or not. If I have time, I probably will. See if I can spruce them up just a bit, even though you know they've been spruced up all through the season, which this may be another spot that I will try to do succulents in. I do love the pretty succulents. I just also love the color and mixture of flowers in a pot, but these are just something that struggle all summer long. So I probably want to get something where they can have a better chance of looking good all summer or all season. This little pot has looked gorgeous, both from the front and from the back. I probably will take a little bit of this too to put in other spots. Not very much though, because it does look so good here. But I've noticed that in front of the little angel's face it's getting too tall again, so I'll probably take a little bit away from that part of it so you can see the angel better. I may leave this pot just like it is. If I spruce it up, it'll be very little. It's done well, really, even though it's had some days where it's wilted down so much I didn't know if it was going to come back out of it, but so far it always has, so I think it'll be fine for the rest of the season. And this little pot, yes, it does need some help. All this bottom part is so scraggly. This side of it has looked good all season, but it definitely does need some attention to be spruced up for fall. And I recently did a trim on this one, and it has actually lasted pretty well. It's looking fairly good. And I noticed yesterday when I was watering that this little pot is really looking good. And I'm going for this butterfly just because it's there and I can. But this little pot is looking good. It probably won't need anything more. I will want to take out some of this verbena, this tall verbena. Simply one thing, because I don't want this much of it to go to seed. I do want some of it. I like it, but it can get out of hand if you don't be careful with it. So I'll take some of it out, but just look, isn't that pretty with that mum opening in the background? Those pretty contrasting colors of yellow, gold, and purple. This little zinnia, I may trim way down. It's been a beauty though, but you can see how it's so full, and just it's been a pretty little zinnia for me, and it grew up so tall and just looked good. But I think it's probably time to take that down a bit where it can renew itself instead of just going ahead and getting shabby leaved. And of course I did these little pots recently, but they still need some help. Look at that. It looks terrible. And that's how the gardeners feel, I'm sure. I know this gardener feels that way. Just like we're on our very last leg, and some of our legs are already gone. But I hope to spruce these up too a little bit. There's plenty of pretty clippings. When the weather gets cooler, it couldn't be done yet. It's hot enough out here right now. We have cool mornings and cool evenings now though, which is great, but we're going to definitely need some cooler weather still if we're going to have time to go ahead and if we're going to be able to go ahead and put some little starts in without the root and have them to live, which is exactly what I hope to get to do. But it's going to have to be prettier, and yet coleus also are one of the first to go when it gets cold, so sometimes it's just not feasible to do all that work for that short period. But if we have a long fall, and you never know what you're going to get, so we'll just have to see what kind of time and how it plays out. And the same story with these little pots. I trimmed them back and it did help them, and there is some beauty there, but as you can see there's some dead stalks there too. So we'll see what we can do with this to spruce it up for fall too. I was kind of surprised that this is one of those swirling butterfly plants, Gara, in this little pot. And I thought it would really do well here, and it's just struggled along. It had a little petunia that probably did better than it did, and it was just a little volunteer petunia, but it needs some fall sprucing up too. And you can tell all around it there where there's the pretty blue, not lobelia, but cardinal flower. And it's almost all spent, so I'll need to trim some of that off too. The garden is definitely looking worse for the summer elements and what it's had to go through. The gardener, the same can be said of her, of this gardener anyway. My little alyssum, there's very few places where it did well. Last year it just was so pretty. It didn't do a whole lot during the summer, but when fall came it just went crazy beautiful. But I don't know, I don't think it's going to do that this fall because it's just so scraggly now, and Spots is barely holding on. I really think I could do better with this little pot too. I'm not sure what. There's one thing I would like to do is where that little tiny pot is that I put one of these and it did so well. I would like to clip it off and put it over here on the other side of this little pot, and I think that would give it quite a bit more beauty right there. And then we'll see if anything else I decide to do with it. This little verbena has kept going and going for me as far as bloom, but you can tell the foliage of it is looking brown and just not pretty at all. I don't know if that will come out of it this fall. Probably not. It will probably just go ahead and harden off and just be brown like that. But sometimes that's just part of fall's beauty. I might even could trim this up just a little bit where you could see the words on this little decor. But this one has done well all season. It is another place where I need to trim back some of these. They're just finishing up their bloom and they're looking kind of ratty. I still like that little bit of bloom on there for color in the garden, but I think it'll probably be time to take some of that if not all of it, down for the fall. For the last hurrah. And this little clematis has looked scraggly all summer long, and yet it's always put on a little bit of bloom for me. And you can overlook that scraggly when all you're seeing is this beautiful bloom. This is another little container that I have worked on, and it does look better. I think it does look better. So it's got the coleus up higher now and fuller, and still showing some of the pretty purple petunias, double petunias. So I kind of like this little container garden, and yet I don't know, it's still kind of scraggly looking where the foliage has given way to harder days. Look at this one, it's kind of shining this morning with those beautiful orange or creamsicle orange double profusion zinnias. And it's another one that has kind of struggled for me, and I've had to change, and did recently kind of try to spruce it up by putting in this little sedum and these little coleus clippings, which were actually put in before the sedum. And my periwinkle this year did not do that well, which is surprising to me. It's always before done so well, even in our heat, but for some reason it just didn't this year. But the sedums have done the best, as far as I haven't done anything to this little pot all season long. It did take quite a while for this Chinese dunce cap to come back, but as you can see, it has came back. Don't give up on it. I think that's what we do as gardeners. We realize, well, that's dead, but it's really not dead. It just stays dormant longer than you would have imagined, but when it starts coming out, it just keeps coming out, and I think it's beautiful. And then above it there I have the little thundercloud. Yeah, it's not thunderstorm, but the thundercloud, which is the miniature sedum, and it works perfectly in this little pot. I also have already spruced this one up a bit by putting these little strawberry drop coleuses around this little angel at the bottom part of the container, and they are beginning, they kind of they wilted, and then they looked wilty for quite some time, but I think they're looking pretty good this morning. They just needed cooler weather, and even though it's not that much cooler, it's cool enough that they're noticing the difference even before we do. This is another little pot that I've done very little to. Actually, it probably wouldn't need anything other than the fact that mine was beginning to look a little scraggly, so I clipped it off and put the pieces that I clipped off in the scragglier areas of this little pot, and I think it looks pretty good. And this little pot is not done so well either. I don't really know why. Usually the scabiosa or pincushion flower does well here. I really think that we've got some fungus in the soil, and so it's just kind of struggling because of we did have a little more rain than we normally do, and the sun was still bright and shining on it, and I just think the heat and the water just caused the conditions to be right for a fungus. But they're still struggling in there. You can see there's still some of them there, so we'll see what will happen with this one next year, or I may try to kind of clip back the old dead stuff and do a little bit with this one too. This one is another where I have added a little to it. Of course, the sedum, it comes back every year, and it's gorgeous, especially right now when it's beginning its beautiful bloom. And then I put some coleus in there, and there's also a little purslane moss there, which has not done that well, but it has been pretty when it has bloomed. And then I had some of this little succulent around the edges, and some of it had died out, so I did put some more there. Don't know if you can tell it. I think you can. So, and it looks like this one is more green than it is the burgundy color the rest of them are, so I may end up putting a little bit more of a burgundy one there. And I don't know if these will live through the winter or not, depending on how our winter is, I guess. So they have before, though. These actually came back. The ones that you see that are fuller there were already there from last year. So we'll see what this little pot will do too. And I'm liking it right now. I love the pretty red crepe myrtle, and it did well this season. Right across from it is where it put up a little one, and it has gotten big this summer, or big for a little plant. But anyway, I'm gonna plan on trying to dig this out. I don't want two right there together. I think I have a spot in front that I may want this one. I'll have to decide that later. But I do want this one moved from this area. One thing I don't want it to take away from this pretty little detail peony. And then there's another one right back there that is I think this is a purple. Up there. So we'll see. They did not bloom this year, of course, because they're still too young, but they will. I had a little ajuga, black ajuga in the center of this, and it was not doing well. So, and I just like the taller look, so I did put this one. You can't hardly tell right now, it's so scraggly. But maybe next year you'll be able to tell. But I thought this was prettier when I had a taller little wafting in the breeze grass in the top of this pot. So I'm going to try that, and hopefully it will be pretty next season. So I went ahead and put my little ajuga right here in the center of this pot, and we'll see how that will work. There is so much stuff that needs to be cut back. But some of that is just the fall garden. That's just what happens in the fall. And so I'm sure there will be no way that I will get all of that cleaned out. But maybe I can clean out enough of it that it won't be the most noticeable, and the beauty will be more noticeable than this old ratty looking stuff. That's the hope. Several years ago I did these 3 little pots with sedums, and I've never been sorry. They were just too hard to keep fresh also, and with the sedum in there, it's just a pretty little green all the rest of the season, that little succulent color. And then in the fall, of course, it puts on the pretty little fluffy seed heads. This is another little pot I filled up with succulents, and then I did put some little coleus clippings in here too. I just love the coleus for color, and they've done well here. You can tell this one's a little wilty right now, but it usually perks up when I give it some water in the afternoon or evening. And then I put all these succulents here. Isn't this a pretty succulent? I might see if I can get some starts from it to put in other places. If I could get those started and get their root down before our frost, or at least before our hard freeze, where they'll stop putting their roots in the ground. But once they get them in there good, I could maybe have another pot of this beautiful sedum. And you know, I've shown you these all season long, off and on, but they're just another little always beautiful plant. These survived that 10 days of below freezing, even after they had already started coming out. That's what got things this year was that they had already began to green up for spring, and then we got frost, and not just frost. It was an absolute like 10-day blizzard for us. I think my friend Alma called it the Snowmageddon. That's what it was. She called it. But yes, for these small pots, I don't think you can do anything better than a pretty sedum. They just work for them. They're just always pretty, and they don't take a lot of care. They don't take a lot of water, so even I do water these each day, but they don't hold much water. None of the containers really do, and these here on the fence row of course don't. So, but anyway, that's what I plan to do, is just go more with succulents for my pots, so that I don't have to struggle with them so all through the season. So I've got several pretty little succulents I could go ahead and put in some pots, and I have some in mind that I would like to order too. There's one called, I think it's called Fulda Glow, that's kind of a bright pink, and I would really like to have one of those. And I think one of them may be called an Atlantis, which has a gold with a green trim, and I think that would be pretty. Actually, there's a lot of beautiful succulents, and I'm beginning to think our weather is more the right conditions for succulents than some of the plants I've been trying to grow. However, I still want to try these beautiful calabachoas, and I think even this one is practically gone. I see only one little bloom of it. Oh look, there is two of the white. I thought it was already totally gone. But sometimes in the fall they do try to come back, but usually there's not enough of mine left for them to come back in the fall. So, but I'm thinking that this one, this little tiered pot, at least the bottom two tiers are quite a bit bigger, and this one actually is a little deeper than the pots I've been trying to do calabachoas in. So I may use this little tiered pot for my calabachoa next year and try that. So this would probably be a great place to get some more coleus for clippings, and yet I'm not sure that I will, because I just like the way it's grown up tall there, and it just demands your attention. But we'll see how that will end up. Of course, there's more to do than I'll ever get done, but I still hope to get enough of it done that it will look not like a whole new garden, but hopefully like a much neater fall garden. I trimmed stuff away from this little girl a few weeks ago, and as you can tell, they've already grown up in front of her face again, so I would like to trim that one also. See if we can get a picture of these beautiful hibiscus bloom, and I'm going to have to go around to the other side and try. And I just clip these off for seed. They are some of my favorites because they're like pink with a little bit of the rainbow swirled in. This looks like I could use some more trim here too. You can barely see this little girl peeking out. So I could trim that zinnia down some, and I definitely want to trim this down and use them in other places, and trim this this little pot to the point where you can see the squirrels again that are hidden in there. And I never have got this little pot to look like anything all season long. Luckily, she's partly covered by this sweet potato vine. And of course, it still remains to be seen whether or not these little seedlings will actually make a plant and put on a bloom that will make us some seed for next year. But I'm hoping they still will, because you know I always hope for a long, beautiful fall. And look, there is a bud there, so maybe we'll get some at least. And this little pot, everything is petunias, but they've all gone to seed. I probably should save some of those seed for next year, but I want to redo this pot with some of those coleus clippings too, so we can have a pretty fall showing in this pot. I don't know if there's any hope for this little pot. It hasn't done well all season either, but we'll see. These little pots also need taming again. I cut them back once and they flowered again and were looking good, but they're looking scraggly and just all in disarray right now. And this is the matching pot on the other end, which doesn't look much better. It's not quite as overgrown, but it definitely needs some trimming and some sprucing up. I'll need to trim back some of this chrysanthemum away from my little girls so you can see them. They'll be dancing for fall and cooler weather. And this, of course, is another little pot of sedum that does well. If you have a shallow place, a place that doesn't get a lot of water, just put a sedum there. Give it a little attention and it'll do fine. These little pots have done well, as have these. In my Jacob's ladder plant or zigzag plant is finally putting its leaves on now that it's time to bring it back inside. This little pot has done well, but this one has struggled all season. I thought it would be great to have a fall mum just blooming beautifully here, but it just has not done well in this pot. So this one probably also needs a little changing for the fall. I think I'll want to trim down where you can see this little girl, and I'll probably use this beautiful coleus in another spot. Definitely want it to be cool enough to start without dying, because I think this may be the only one I have this bright and pretty of this color. It may be the only one I have of this particular color, but isn't it pretty? So again, I hope to do some of that overgrown, bedraggled look and turn it into a little bit more of a pretty fall garden. Please be sure to like and to subscribe to the channel.